Welcome to this video lecture, and in this video we will discuss about analogy. But before that, let me introduce myself to you. I am teacher Johaini Angaspati, your English teacher. So let us start our day with a prayer. Let us put ourselves in the presence of Almighty Allah. Okay, good morning everybody. And today let us check your attendance. And please raise your right hand and say present if you're here. Okay, very good for the perfect attendance. This time, I will present to you our classroom standards and rules and regulations. For our classroom standards, we have this following.
Number 1. Always use proper words. Saying bad words have punishments. Number 2. Do active listening when the teacher is discussing. Number 3. Be respectful of one another. Number 4. Always participate in classroom discussion. And number 5. Cheating is prohibited.
For our rules and regulations, we have also this following.
Number 1. Raise your right hand when asking questions. Number 2. Sit properly. And number 3. Use po and opo.
Now, I will show to you a picture of a paired words and tell me what you see in the picture. First picture we have is this one. So what do you see in the picture? Yes, very good. This picture represents crying and laughing. So, class, tell me what is the relationship between crying and laughing? Yes? Very good. The relationship between crying and laughing, they are antonyms because they are, yes, they are opposite in meaning. They are opposite to each other. When you are crying, the opposite of the crying is laughing. Very good. So how about this picture? Yes, very good. This represents house and home. So tell me class, if what's the relationship between house and home? Yes, very good. The relationship between house and home, they are synonyms. Why? Is it because house and home are almost similar in meaning, so that they are synonyms. Okay, next picture is this one. Yes, very good. This picture represents mouth and teeth, or teeth and mouth. So tell me class, if what is the relationship between teeth or tooth and mouth? Very good. The relationship between teeth and mouth is that the teeth is the part of our mouth. So the relationship between this one is part to whole. Very good. Another, this one. Yes, the first picture represents bird. Very good. And the first picture, the second picture represents, yes, fly. So what do you think is the relationship between these two? Yes, good. Good answer. The relationship between these two is that bird is the one who does the action, which is the fly. And the fly is the action done by the first word, which is the bird. Another third pictures. Yes, Christine, very good. The first picture represents ball pen, and the second picture represents the word write. So now, Christy, can you tell me if what is the relationship between ball pen and the write? Very good. The relationship between ball pen and write is that object and function, because the object here is the word or is the picture number 1, which is the ball pen, while the function of the ball pen is to write. Okay, very good. And the last picture or paired picture is this one. Can you tell me, John, if what is the representation of these pictures? Yes, very good. The first picture represents teacher like me, and the second picture represents Chalk, of course. And their relationship is? Their relationship is the profession and the object used by the professional. Because the teacher is the one who teach and the chalk is the object we use to teach or in teaching. Very good, you did all great. The reason why we are trying to know the relationship of each paired word is that because our topic for today is about analogy. And let us now define what is analogy.
Analogy. Analogy is a comparison of two unlike things based on the resemblance of a particular aspect.
Now it's time to do our activity. And our activity named Race Game. I will divide you into two groups, and the right side will be the group 1 and the left side will be the group 2. And I will say a word and tell me what is the antonym or the synonym of the given word. Are you ready? Very good. Number 1. Class, can you tell me what is the antonym of the word dry? Yes, Chrissy. Exactly. The antonym of the word dry is wet. So that dry is to wet. How about this one? Class, what is the synonym of the word house? Yes, very good. The synonym of the word house is home. House is to home. Great job! Now, since you have already an idea about analogy, now class, can you tell me what is the relevance of analogy or why analogy is important? Yes, very good. Analogy is important because analogy is useful to explain an unfamiliar concept or idea. Now, let's discuss the 7 classifications of analogy. The first classification of analogy is antonym. Let's define antonym. Antonym is an analogy that means an opposite of other word. Example: hot is to cold, white is to black, and child is to an adult. They are called antonyms because the first word is opposite into the second word, or the first word, which is the hot, is the opposite of the second word, which is the cold. In other words, the hot is opposite to the word cold, or they are opposite to each other. That's why we call it as antonym analogy from the word opposite. So let us keep in our mind the word opposite. When we say opposite, it is antonyms. They are opposite to each other. Cold is to hot, or hot is to cold, as child is to an adult, or white is to black. The second classification of analogy is synonym. Let's define synonym. Synonym is an analogy that has the same meaning as another word. For instance, accurate is to correct, ability is to skill, and the last one is afraid is to scare, or afraid is to scare. As we can observe, these examples are all synonyms. Why? Because they have the same meaning, right? The key term here is the same meaning. If the first classification of analogy is antonym, that the key term is opposite in meaning, the second classification of analogy is synonym, which is the key term has the same meaning. The third classification of analogy is part to whole. Let's define part to whole. Part to whole are pairs that show the first word as part of the second word. Example, fingers is to hand, tire is to car, leaves is to flower. As we can observe, these examples belong into an analogy which is a part of whole. Why? Because according to the definition, that the first word is the part of the second word. Like for instance, the fingers is to hand. Why it is part of whole? Why? Because our fingers is the part of our hand, and the tire is the part of the car, and also the leaves is the part of the flower. That's why we call this as part of whole. The third classification of analogy is performance and action. Let's define performance and action. Performance and action, the first word rather is the one who does the action, and the second word is the action being done by the performer. Example, teacher is to teach, chef is to cook, and the last one is author is to write. As we can observe, these examples are all belong into the performance and action. As we reflect on the definition, the first word is the one who does the action. As the one example, or the number one example, which is the teacher is to teach. The teacher is the one who does the action, which is the teach. So the teach there represents the action being done by the performer. Another example, chef is to cook. Chef is the first word, which is that word or that one who does the action, or that word is the one who does the action, while the cook or the second word is the action being done by the chef or the first word. So another example is author is to write. The author is the one who does the action, which is that action is we call it as writing, right? The author is to write. Author is to write, performance, and the another classification of analogy. Object and function. Let's define it. Object as the first word and its function as the second word. Example, taxi is to transport, t-shirt is to wear, chair is to sit. As we can observe, these examples belong into the object and function. Why? The key terms here are the word object and the word function. Because the object as the first word, which is the taxi, and the function as the second word, which is to transport. Meaning, we use we use taxi to transport. We use t-shirt to wear. We use chair to sit. So that is the functions of each object. That's why we call this as object and function. Another classification of analogy is performer and object. Let's define performer and object. The first word represents the working professional, and the second word represents the tool for their working. For example, author is to pen, cashier is to cash. As we can observe, these examples are all included in performer and object. Go back to the performer or performance and action. So the performance and action, it talks about the performer, which is example the teacher, and the action is to teach, or the author, and the action is to write. So now we are not talking about the action. We are talking about the object or the tool used by the performer. So lately I gave you an example like the author is to write. Now the example here is author is to pen, because the pen is the tool. We are talking about the tool used by the performer, not the action. You get it? Did you understand? Very good. Now let's move to the last classification of analogy, which is the cause and effect. So let's define cause and effect. Cause and effect represent the reason of an action and the result of an action. The key terms here are the word reason and the result, and cause and effect. Example: sad is to cry, hungry is to eat. As we can observe, these examples are all included in cause and effect. Why? Because the first word is the cause of an action or the reason of the action, and the second word is the effect of the action. Of course, when we are sad, sometimes we cry because of our emotions or because of our feelings. And sometimes when we feel hungry, we eat. That is the effect of our feelings or the cause of our action. So that's all the 7 classifications of analogy. Again, antonyms, the synonyms to cause and effect. Did you understand? Very good. Now class, my question is, what kind of analogy is this? Yes, very good. This is object and function. Why? Because the first word, which is the chalk, is the object, and the second word is the function. The function of the chalk is to write, or we use chalk to write. Now, since you have already know a knowledge about this topic, which is the analogy and its 7 classifications, now let's try to apply your knowledge about this lesson by simply giving you a paired words. Now, this is the instruction. This time, you will complete the incomplete paired words to form an analogy by simply choosing from these given choices. I will give you 15 seconds to answer. Now let's check your answer. The answer of the number 1 is letter B. The answer of number 2 is letter C. Number 3 is letter B. Number 4, letter C. And number 5, letter A. Now let's check. Car is to transport. Teeth is to mouth. Hair is to head. Small is to tall. And rice is to eat. Now, what do you think is the analogy, or what kind of analogy is the number 1, which is the car is to transport? If you said it is object and function, then you're correct, because car is the object and the function is to transport. The second one is the teeth is to mouth. If you said it is part of whole, then you're also correct. The number 3 is the hair is to head, and this is also part of whole, of course. And the fourth one is tall is to small. If you said it is antonym, then you're correct. The last one is rice is to eat. And if you said it is object and function, exactly, you're correct. If you got 5/5, then excellent. But if you got 1/5, then you need a little improvement. Very good, class. Of course, before we end this video lesson, let's have first our quiz. So answer the following and I will give you 15 minutes to answer. Are you done? Now pass your papers forward, and for your assignment, copy this one on your paper and pass it tomorrow. Class dismissed.